Welcome to Harvey's Huddle. Happy New Year. I'm Jackson Harvey. Welcome to the end of the NFL regular season. We have a lot to talk about. There's a lot of things that go on towards the end of the season. One of my favorites is, of course, Black Monday, which is, I guess it shouldn't really be a favorite per se, but we're going to talk about all of the coaching changes that could be going on towards the end of Sunday and into Monday, January the 4th. And there's a lot of clinching scenarios going on this week. There were about 4 or 5 teams that could have clinched spots in the playoffs. Most of them, I believe, in the AFC, but all of them failed to do so last week. So we've got a lot of interesting scenarios that could play out. And of course, this is going to also be the last week for any players trying to add to their resumes for the end of the regular season awards. I asked you guys some questions about just things I wanted to talk about today. One of them was about the MVP race, and I was kind of surprised. It was a 3-3 split between 2 players. One of them was not Patrick Mahomes, which I was surprised by. You guys were pretty split on Rodgers versus Josh Allen, which surprised me a little bit. I gotta say, I really think Rodgers has this award in the bag almost. When I think about a most valuable player, I almost think of, who can you not, if you take one of these players out of the picture for one of these teams, how will they do? If you take Patrick Mahomes out of the picture, I think Kansas City, they won't be as great as they are, but they would be able to have some sort of success because of the talent that's all around Patrick Mahomes right now. You've got one of the best receiving corps in the league. You've got some great running backs in the backfield. You've got a pretty good defense going on. So I don't think Patrick Mahomes would necessarily be my MVP, although he is having a good stats here. But Rodgers, I look at him, and if you take Aaron Rodgers out of that Green Bay offense, there's no way that Green Bay is doing as well as they are right now. They're in position to lock up the number 1 seed in the NFC and to earn themselves a week 1 bye, or a 1 week bye into the playoffs. And so I like Rodgers for this award. When you put him up against Allen, yes, I think Allen's had a great season, but it didn't really start out all that great. Rodgers, he was good right from the get-go. He was throwing touchdowns, winning games. He had that little blip against the Buccaneers, but more often than not, he's been phenomenal. Whereas I think Allen, he took a little while to get used to some of the newer players on his roster, and he didn't really do as well. We kind of doubted him a little bit early on as well, I believe. So I got to give this one to Rodgers, who doesn't have very many interceptions, has, I believe, either almost 40 or over 40 touchdowns on the season. He's playing great ball. He's my most valuable player in the NFL now. If you look at the other awards, I was just kind of messing around and thinking about it. Offensive Player of the Year, this one's a really hard one for me to look at and decide who wins. In my mind, it's between Derrick Henry, Stephon Diggs, and Travis Kelce. I think Derrick Henry has had a phenomenal season, and I really think he should be our Player of the Year. Although Kelce is breaking some major barriers going on in the tight end position, in the way that he's just racked up. He is number 2 as of at the end of week 16. He's the number 2 most leading in receiving yards at the moment, because Stephon Diggs had such a successful outing against New England. But I think I would give this one to Derrick Henry because of the amount of effort, and just it feels like every week there's a new Derrick Henry highlight reel going on. No matter who's there, he's always running them over, especially this season. As for the Defensive Player of the Year, this one's harder to call for me. First of all, I'm not super defensive minded. I'm more of an offensive kind of guy, but with the defense, it seemed like it was TJ Watt's award to lose around the mid-season mark, and I haven't really seen a lot out of him the last few weeks. He did play pretty well against the Colts on Sunday in their comeback win, but I would probably still give it to TJ Watt. I think he's going to end up with it. He's got 15 sacks on the season and 37 solo tackles, which is up there in the stats. But I think Aaron Donald is in the running as well. He's always in the running. He's just a freak of nature, the way he's built. For Offensive Rookie of the Year, there's a lot of different kind of circumstances that I think people go through. Last year, of course, Kyler Murray won it, I believe. I have a personal opinion that Gardner Minshew should have won it. Not that I'm biased towards the Jaguars or anything, but Gardner Minshew last year, he won, I think, 7 or 8 Rookie of the Week awards. So, but anyways, this is about this year. I like Justin Jefferson in this one. I like James Robinson. He's been absolutely incredible. The fact that an undrafted rookie running back, I believe the stat is the third undrafted rookie running back to run for 1,000 yards in his rookie season. And especially with a Jaguars team that has been just abysmal everywhere else. He's been the one thing that Jaguars fans can hang their hats on and say, we've got Robinson. They also have a good young receiving core, but Robinson has been the one silver lining in a otherwise dreary season for the Jaguars. And so I want to give it to James Robinson. I think James Robinson deserves it, the way that he has been playing. The fact that he's also the number 3 running back in terms of rushing yards on the season, despite not playing in Week 16, I think that's phenomenal. I think he's going to end up probably still in the top 5, if not the top 4. So I really think he deserves it. Justin Jefferson is up there as well. If Antonio Gibson hadn't been hurt, he would be in the running, I think. If Joe Burrows hadn't have gotten hurt, he would definitely be in the talks as well. But as for everyone who has been playing this season, I think James Robinson deserves it. And I think Defensive Rookie of the Year is really easy. It's easy to say Chase Young. He's been a catastrophic to other opposing offenses. He's just been phenomenal. I think he scored 2 defensive touchdowns this year. He forces turnovers. He's had 6.5 sacks, 28 solo tackles, and he's really been what I think the missing piece in that Washington defense, coached by Jack Del Rio. And I just think that Chase Young really deserves that award as Defensive Rookie of the Year. Now, let's talk about some Black Monday. And like I said, it really shouldn't be one of my favorite topics to talk about, but there's something about coaching changes that just seems so, not exciting, but it's really a huge part of the NFL and of this time of year. And I think it can really spark some teams into just being better football clubs. I mean, look at Stefanski over in Cleveland. He's completely changed the culture over there, and they're now in a position to make it to the playoffs, even though they lost to the Jets last week. And if you want to say they're really pulling a Cleveland over there, potentially missing the playoffs, they've got quite the path to clinch. I think they need to win. They need the Dolphins to win, and there's another team that needs to win or tie, or Indianapolis losing, or Baltimore losing. But anyways, this is about Black Monday. We've already had 3 teams fire their coaches mid-season. Those teams are Houston, Atlanta, and Detroit. They fired Bill O'Brien in Houston, Dan Quinn in Atlanta, and Matt Patricia in Detroit. And so when I asked y'all on Instagram how many you think, you guys said about 3 or 4. I think there could be 3 or 4, and my candidates for potentially being fired are as follows. Adam Gase. If you guys have listened to me consistently over the last few weeks, Adam Gase is someone I do not like as a head coach. Yes, they've gotten a couple of wins against better teams in the last few weeks, but I don't like him. I don't think he's a good coach. And if those 2 wins are enough for New York to keep him around, go at it. If they do well next year because of Gase being the head coach still, fine. But he has done an awful job at coaching this year, and I think he should be on the chopping block. Vic Fangio, he's someone that I'm looking to leave the Broncos potentially. I don't see a lot of leadership in that locker room. I think they have been trying to get Drew Lock to step up and be a leader, but he hasn't been able to fill that role. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Johnny Manziel and Cleveland, but I don't think he's got a very good control over that locker room. He also had a few injuries that kind of plagued the team, especially with Von Miller leaving the week before, or a few weeks before the regular season started. He's had a rough go, but I think he could be someone that the Broncos look at and they look at offloading a bit, mainly because I think they just need change. They've been lacking this kind of leadership that Peyton Manning brought, and ever since he's left, I think they're trying to find someone to fill that role, and it just hasn't been able to function the same way that they were able to in their Super Bowl run. I'm looking for Mike Zimmer potentially to get fired. The thing with a lot of head coaching decisions and firings in this Black Monday year after year that I find is a lot of teams, yes, the Vikings have had a pretty decent season. They're not going to make the playoffs, but I just think they had such a good chance with Case Keenum and the Minneapolis Miracle that happened a few years back and then got blown out by the Eagles in the championship round. But a factor of a coach getting fired is usually if they're not able to take that next step, right? If you're not able to get the team to the Super Bowl that you want them to go to, or to get the team to be better. And it seems like year after year, the last 3 or 4 years, Mike Zimmer's team in Minnesota has regressed a bit each year. For instance, they made it to the championship game in whatever year that was against the Eagles, when the Eagles won the Super Bowl. The year after that, they didn't get out of the divisional round. And now they're not even making the playoffs. And so I think that would be enough for the Vikings leadership to say, you know what, maybe we need a little Kickstarter, and it's going to start at head coach. That one's kind of a little bit of a like far out prediction that Zimmer's getting fired, but I really think it could come into fruition, and I think that it could be smart for the Vikings to go after someone who's more of an offensive mind. You heard Stephon Diggs say a few weeks ago, like, yeah, I didn't like being in Minnesota because they were so run heavy. And that, I think, comes from a defensive-minded coach who's very ground and pound, like Mike Zimmer. They could really benefit from an offensive-minded coach because I think they have players that are good enough to respond to a good defensive coordinator and don't need a defensive head coach. Another one to look at is Anthony Lynn with the Chargers. They have lost a lot of close games this year, and I think a lot of that can be attributed to coaching, and also they have a rookie quarterback that they've been leaning on all season who doesn't have the experience that they need, but I think they really can't waste the talent and the connection that they have with some of these players like Austin Eckler, Justin Herbert, Keenan Allen, and again, they have the defensive tools to really make a run at the AFC West. I really think they have the chance to do that. Finally, I'm looking at Doug Marrone to be fired as well in Jacksonville. After going to the AFC Championship in 2017, it's been nothing but a downward slope for the Jacksonville Jaguars, which is crazy. And of course, their GM, general manager, got fired mid-season, so it looks like they're cleaning house. And I really think that they should take a look at getting rid of Doug Marrone. Awesome job in 2017. They had a great coaching staff. They were a couple of plays away from the Super Bowl, which is incredible for them. But the absolute implosion that has gone on since then is just inexcusable. And I think Doug Marrone is a big reason why. They fired, of course, Dave Caldwell, general manager, and Tom Coughlin was fired last season. So I think it's Doug Marrone's time. The one thing I do want to say, and I want to be cautious about, is I don't think the Jaguars should hire Jake Gruden as the head coach, who is their offensive coordinator right now. I think they should bring someone in and let Jake Gruden continue to be a coordinator, because I think he is a fantastic coordinator, not a fantastic head coach. So I have some ideas who should replace these coaches. Again, they're just ideas. I'm not a insider of any kind. I don't know who everyone's talking to and what kind of interviews they're setting up and things like that, but I just kind of looked at some names that I think could be good, and some coordinators out there that could be seen as up and comers and who have been talked about as such. So I tried to match them the best I could to these teams that I think are getting rid of coaches. So let's take a look. For the Jets, I actually think Jack Del Rio might be a good head coach for them. He's got a more defensive mind. He's currently the defensive coordinator for Washington, and he's done a fantastic job with that defense. They're one of the top 5 defenses in the league right now, in my opinion. But I think he did a pretty good job in Jacksonville as a head coach, and he was the head coach of the Raiders for a few years. And I think it might be time for him to take a step up again and be the head coach of the Jets. However, I do think he needs a really good offensive coordinator in order to handle whoever comes to him in the draft, potentially, with the number 2 pick. Of course, Justin Fields had a great game on Friday night, and he could be heading to be a Jet or a Jaguar. So we'll see how that unfolds. But Jack Del Rio, I think Jack Del Rio might be a good choice for the Jets. For Houston, I put down Robert Saleh. I don't know if that's how I say his last name. I've heard a lot of different pronunciations, but he's a defensive coordinator for the San Francisco 49ers. I think this could be a way to keep J.J. Watt around. There's been some quotes going around and some uncertainty about Watt and his contract, and I think this could be a way to say, like, hey, we hear you, JJ, we want you to stay, but could you imagine JJ going to the Steelers and you have all 3 Watt brothers on the same team? I would love that. I think that would be great. Could you imagine facing TJ and JJ on the Steelers defense? Oh, that would be a top move by the Steelers, I think. But Houston, if you pick up Robert Saleh, I think that could be really good for keeping around a defensive superstar like J.J. Watt. In Minnesota, I actually think Josh McDaniels might be a good choice. New England, of course, isn't the team that they were with Tom Brady. They're not. I don't know if Josh McDaniels is really up to the task to try to develop a quarterback like Jarrett Stidham or any quarterback that they might pick up in the draft. So I think Josh McDaniels might thrive with an offensive team with Dalvin Cook, Adam Thielen, Justin Jefferson, and Kirk Cousins already there, and just developing the chemistry between all of them. And really, I think if they had a balanced attack, that team could be scary. And like I said, they already have defensive players that can take it to the opposing team. So Josh McDaniels might be a good fit in Minnesota. In Detroit, Greg Roman. I think Greg Roman could be a good fit. He's the defensive coordinator for Baltimore. Sorry, not defensive, offensive coordinator for Baltimore right now. He really likes a solid run game, and what we saw in DeAndre Swift this season was a lot of promise, and I think they could really go with a good balanced attack in Detroit. And I just think Greg Roman would be a great fit for Detroit. In Atlanta, they have had an interim head coach by the name of Raheem Morris, and I think he's done a phenomenal job. Ever since Dan Quinn was fired, the Falcons have all of a sudden become more competitive. They haven't necessarily taken the next step yet, and I think that's partly because of the inexperience of Morris at the time. But I think he's done a phenomenal job as the interim head coach, and I think Atlanta should consider signing him and locking him up for a permanent head coach position, because, I mean, just last week they were in it with Kansas City, and they were able to almost pull off a solid win. So Raheem Morris, I think you should keep him around in Atlanta. For Denver, I've got Bill O'Brien. It would be a really big Broncos thing to do to bring a failed head coach who just got fired and put him in the rotation. I think that's who they'll probably go with. But I also think O'Brien, it is so hard in the NFL to be a general manager and a head coach. And I think a lot of the mistakes he made was as a general manager. But I think he could be a pretty decent head coach in Denver. So we'll see if that happens. For the Chargers, I've got Joe Brady. He's the offensive coordinator for Carolina at the time. He's 31 years old. I think it might be too early for him to go, but it could happen. He's a great offensive mind. He's done a great job with Teddy Bridgewater and the likes of the Carolina offense down there. They didn't make the playoffs. One of their best players was gone for most of the season, but I think he is a great offensive mind who should be looked at as a possible candidate for the next few years to come. And of course in Jacksonville, I think a lot of people are talking about Eric Bieniemy, and that he should be a head coach this year. He should have been a head coach last year with someone, but I think Bieniemy could be a possibility here. However, I really like the offensive coordinator for the Buccaneers, Byron Leftwich. Byron Leftwich, he was a quarterback. He backed up David Garrard way back when for the Jaguars, I believe in like 2006, and he was a starting quarterback for a year or two, I think. But Leftwich, he's got the ties to the Jaguars organization. He's been doing a pretty great job with the Tampa Bay offense as of the last few weeks. And I think he would be a great combination with Jay Gruden as the offensive coordinator, and they just need a pretty good defensive coordinator to take over in Jacksonville as well. And I think they could have a really good run next year with whoever they pick in the first overall in the draft. I think Leftwich would be up to the task to develop a Trevor Lawrence into an NFL quarterback. If Justin Fields has a good game next week against the Crimson Tide, I think you could see Fields even being talked about as a number one quarterback. But I really think Leftwich could do a great job in Jacksonville and should be treated as such. That's all I've got for you for Black Monday, and for the end of season awards. Let me know what you think on Instagram at Harvey's Huddle and on Twitter at Harvey_Huddle. And I just hope you guys are having a great new year. Enjoy the upcoming few weeks as playoffs come around, and hopefully I got some of these things right with the coaching situations and the regular season awards. I'm Jackson Harvey. This has been Harvey's Huddle. Take care.